Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Oguze. Thank you for joining us this evening on today's workshop, Renewing the Mind, Understanding Emotional Reactions and the Path to Healing. Thank you for joining us this evening on today's workshop, Renewing the Mind, Understanding Emotional Reactions and the Path to Healing. Thank you for joining us. Hi, good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Oguze, Community Engagement Specialist, Youth Man on Track Services. Thank you so much. We are really glad that you have the time to be here with us today. On today's workshop, we are going to discuss the topic, Renewing the Mind, Understanding Emotional Reactions, and the Path to Healing. And it's my pleasure to introduce the guest speaker, Dr. Blackwood, the healing communication coach with over 2 decades experience in connecting deeply with individuals in their growth and healing journey by conducting group counseling, coaching, and workshops. Welcome, Dr. Blackwood, to this evening session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Are you able to make me a co-host, Unye? That would be great. Now, I'm looking forward to engaging with everyone. If you can just wave in the chat, just let me know that you are here. I'm going to ask that everyone mute themselves. Good to see everybody. And feel free to make use of the chat as we're going through. We'll come to a question and answer period a little bit later. But I'm going to ask that everybody mute themselves. That would be great. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. If you can share, if you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Yes, thank you. So I had a call earlier today. A young man, one of the people who I am mentoring, called me just to check in, and he shared a scenario with me. And after sharing the scenario, because he was having conflict with his wife, he's newlywed and a new dad and all this stuff. And he just called me to get some perspective because I'm a little bit further down the road than he is. We have a trusting relationship. So he wanted some perspective. Why? Because he wanted to make sure that he was not overreacting. Anybody overreact sometimes? I have children. I have two daughters of my own, and currently I have one foster son. And every now and then I catch myself and I talk to myself, and I'm like, Andrew, come on, it's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal. And believe it or not, me talking to myself is in essence me catching myself and renewing my mind. Okay. So sometimes we think to have a new perspective or renew the mind, we need like a brain transplant or something. Sometimes it doesn't have to be that deep. We want to be able to catch ourselves to acknowledge when we're overreacting and when we're underreacting, because that can be a possibility too. The mind can be a very confusing thing. So tonight we're just going to do a little bit of an overview about what contributes to us reacting to situations instead of responding. Let's start here. Does anyone know the difference? You can unmute if you want. I want to know, what do you think is the difference between reacting and responding? Is there a difference to you guys? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute and share your thoughts. Anybody? Yeah, right off the hop, I'm throwing questions out there. Anybody know the difference, or are they just the same to you? You think they're the same? Because I think they're different. What about you, Pastor Francis? Do you think reacting and responding are different or the same?
Uh, for me, I think acting and the responding, they're not so
I I lost your
I would
voice.
say that,
Can you
I,
say again?
don't want me to define what I mean. That's what they
Oh, it
want
looks
me
like
to
we have a
expand,
bad
expand
connection.
what
If
I
you
mean.
can, just type it in the chat. I love to hear Pastor Francis's contributions. I love the way that he thinks. But there's a big difference, and maybe we'll circle back to it. I'll give you guys time to put something in the chat. But let's take a look at this. Why do we react the way that we do? Why do we react the way that we do? Well, this little guy here. I love this picture. I love this picture. You know his reaction is big. There could be so many things going through his head, his mind, his body. He could be angry at somebody, or he could be feeling the shock because the water is cold. Reactions. He's reacting to something. And there can be so many different things that contribute to his reaction. So for me, the difference between a reaction and a response is a reaction is like reflex. Although there's always thought involved, it's really quick. It's not an intentional process where you weigh the pros and the cons and you decide what to say. No, no, you react. It's just off the top. And we're human beings. We're human beings, and we are just so complex. There's so many parts to us. So if we want to understand reactions, it's important for us to understand our humanity. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. There's nothing like us on the planet. There are complex beings, but we are by far the most complex. Fun fact, the skin is an organ. Some of you are biology experts, but some time ago when I learned that, it just didn't make sense to me. But when you really think about it, this our skin, this unit of epidermis, it's actually an organ. It's one of the most important organs the human body has. It forms a protective barrier between the external environment and our internal organs. It's designed to protect us. So it's the integumentary system. Okay. And let me tell you, I cut my finger the other day. I was just doing dishes and I cut my finger, and the cut wasn't very big, but it was kind of deep. And the next day, when I was washing dishes again, the water was hot, but it wasn't that hot until it touched that part of my body where there wasn't as much skin. I didn't realize how valuable my skin was and how much of a protector it was until that part was gone. Our organs, the way that we're designed, it has an impact. And we overlook how important these things are, these systems. We take them for granted. Your respiratory system, breathing, your breathing apparatus. Let me tell you, if your breathing is off, you're going to react differently than if your breathing is functioning properly. One of the major things um, a chiropractor actually helped me with many years ago. Um, my ribs were somewhat out of place and it was impacting my breathing. It was so painful. Let me tell you, my mood, oh my, I could hardly think straight because my breathing, I wasn't functioning properly. Your cardiovascular circulatory system, that's connected to your breathing. If your blood isn't healthy and it's not flowing properly, if you don't have good circulation, I'll use myself as an example. Sometimes it's not like I have the greatest circulation. My hands are cold, my feet are on the cold. I get grumpy. That's just me. Okay. The digestive system. When people are upset, they can't eat, right? When they're anxious or nervous or really, really angry, some people don't eat. They don't process food well. Okay. Our hormones, okay, the endocrine system, our thyroid, our adrenal glands. As we get older, sometimes, women, they go through perimenopause, menopause. Hormones can be different. Some of the biggest conflicts my wife and I have had were during pregnancy. When hormones are changing, it impacts the way that we react. Okay. Our nervous system, where our brains, that they have nerves attached to them. Synapses are firing, and when they're not firing properly, our nervous system is off. We're gonna react differently. Why do we react the way we do? It's important to realize how complex we are. It's not a simple scenario where you're just overreacting. We dismiss things sometimes because we do not understand how complex we are. My goal here tonight is not to simplify or oversimplify things. It's actually to expand our appreciation of why we react. So hopefully we can move from reacting to responding because there is a difference. Okay? There is a difference. So I've talked about me a lot. I've talked about me a lot. I want to know something. How well do you know yourself? Okay. Because when it comes to talking about reacting and understanding our reactions, the best thing that you can do is know yourself well. Know yourself well. Okay. I want to know. There's several of us on the call. I want to ask you a rating question. Okay. And I just want you to put a number in the chat. On a scale of 1 to 10, now, how upset would you be? One is, I'd be a little bit upset. And 10 would be like, I would be uncontrollably angry. How angry might you feel if your best friend forgot your birthday? On a scale of 1 to 10. Put it in the chat. I'm curious. So we got a 3. Okay, we got a 2. So some of you wouldn't be that upset. Okay. How angry or how upset would you be if your mother or your father, a close family member, if they forgot your birthday? I think Pastor Francis, I think you're still unmuted. Okay. So we got okay. So someone said a 2. Okay. Someone said a 7. Okay. What if your spouse forgot your birthday? How upset might you be? Okay. Right? Now we got an 8. We're getting up there. Okay, we got another 8. Right? So, depending on who you are, okay, your number would be different. It's relative. It's relative depending on your relationship with these people. Depending on what you think about birthdays. You might not like birthdays, but you might love birthdays. But based on these numbers, it looks like we have different levels of expectation based on the relationship. Okay. We're going to talk about expectations soon enough. But as you can see, we will react, we will feel differently from one person to the next, which is why knowing yourself is really important. When it comes to moving from reacting to responding, the first thing you want to be able to do is get to know yourself. One of the ways to get to know yourself is to look for patterns. Patterns are the best way to start to make your way towards renewal and change. Because if we don't have a pattern, then we're just guessing and things are just random. And the reality is, a lot of the times, if we are reacting to something or overreacting to something, it's probably going to happen again. And if it happens again, it's good to compare these things. Some of us, our memories aren't so great. But that's the beauty of being in a relationship with other people for longer periods of time. People will remind you. Okay. If you want to experience change, one of the things you can do, excuse me, is look for patterns. Okay. And when you're looking for patterns and you're thinking about changing and reactions, we want to use a holistic approach. Okay. Whether you call it holistic or comprehensive, it's important to think about yourself as a whole human being. I work a lot with people in relationships. And a lot of the times we tend to try to come to conclusions and we come to hasty conclusions. They're usually inaccurate because we want everything to be about one thing, one factor, one contributing factor, and it usually has to do with the other person, right? In reality, there are so many things that contribute to a dynamic or even a sequence of events. Okay. When we think about us as humans, I think it's important to have a comprehensive approach, whether we're talking about our mental health, our physical health, we're talking about relationships. We want to see ourselves as whole beings. There is the biological aspect, there is the sociological aspect, and there's a spiritual aspect of us. And a lot of people, when we think about ourselves, depending on where we come from, our culture, our history, our faith, or religion, sometimes we tend to find ourselves in one of these camps, maybe two, and maybe we miss out on the third. But the way I see it is we're all a mix of these things, and they're all playing a part all the time. So it's important to think about yourself as a physical being. When I react to situations, what's going on? That's one of the first things I do with people. We do a little brainstorm exercise. We put the incident in the middle of a circle on a page, and we make all these sticks that come from it, these lines, and then we brainstorm. We say, okay, what was going on? We think about it. Were you hungry? Were you tired? Did you have some good sleep? Or had you been going for a week without sleep? Okay. Are you recovering from some sort of injury, whether it's a physical injury or emotional? Well, we're not dealing with emotional yet. But sometimes there can be a connection. You can hurt yourself and then have feelings about hurting yourself. Okay. I'm working with someone who's an athlete and he's preparing for a meet and he's experiencing physical pain, but then that taps into the emotional pain, the disappointment, the fear and the worry about what's going to happen, and then he's now potentially more reactive because there's all this stuff going on. Sometimes we might be experiencing some sort of disease. Sometimes our physical beings, we have issues with our genetics, right? We live in a world where sometimes we have problems that we've inherited, physical problems. Okay, whether it's diabetes or something of that sort, these things can impact how we react to situations. I'll never forget, for 18 months, several years ago, I was suffering. I'm talking about some of the worst suffering I've ever experienced in my life because I was falling asleep around the wheel. It was that bad, excessive daytime sleepiness. And it was really frightening because I almost dozed off. I dozed off with my little girls in the back of the car. It wasn't safe for me to drive. And I was the sole income earner at the time, so I felt, really trapped. But a lot of physical things were happening to me. My mood was all over the place. I was crying over spilled milk, not figuratively, literally. I was crying over spilled milk. Come to find out, it was gluten. I've been eating gluten all my life, and now all of a sudden, when I eat gluten, it impacts me in this way. So I've been off gluten, at least intentionally, anyways, for the past several years. And if I have gluten, I get the brain fog, I get the mood instability, all these things. I'm super reactive. And it's not just to negative situations. If I'm happy, I'm extremely happy because of my diet. Your gut, they say, is like the second brain. What you put in your stomach matters more than you think. Okay. So we want to look for patterns. Am I reactive after I've had food or if I haven't had food? Let's talk about psychological aspects, the thoughts. And, there's this overlap between the psychological and the physical because you think with your brain. But thoughts are things that most people don't really understand and what impacts our thoughts. Some people talk a lot about overthinking, right? That's another code word for code word for anxiety. Overthinking, if you have certain thought patterns, negative what ifs, thoughts that come over and over and they're intrusive thoughts and they keep coming. They can wear you down. You could feel so tired just from thinking. And then you're going to be more reactive to certain situations. Or if you have a different way of learning, you have a learning style, learning difference, or some a diagnosis of some sort, being in certain environments or being asked to do certain things, they'll be more taxing on you because of how your brain is and how you learn. Some kids, they react poorly when they come home after school because they are exhausted from having exercised their brains in a particular way. They might be more reactive because of their learning style or their environment that they've been in. I know we've been talking about emotions. When we think about reactions, we automatically think about emotions, but moods, a lot of people don't understand moods. The way I see moods, moods are like a cloud of different emotions. There are thousands of emotions that we can experience. And most of the time, we're not really good at acknowledging them or labeling them. So when I meet with people and I ask them, how are you feeling? Or how did you feel in that moment? Most people are like, I don't know. And then I think about it because I've been meeting with thousands of people for years. Say, well, is there a chance you might have felt left out, forgotten, defeated, discouraged, hopeless, angry, upset, confused? They're like, yeah, 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 I felt that too. And they can relate to all these different emotions that they never labeled. And it's like a dark cloud of these unpleasant emotions hanging over them, following them in and out of these environments and situations. You go to sleep with this mood, you wake up with this mood, and every day it gets heavier and heavier and thicker. You're probably going to be much more reactive or sometimes even less reactive. My kids come to me sometimes and they come to me, they're excited about things. They're like, Dad, this happened to me today. This happened. And I let them know, listen, I'm very tired. I'm very happy about what you're saying. You're just not going to see it. You're not going to hear it because I'm tired. And that little explanation, because I know myself, it helps them. It's not the same as if I were, emotionally alive and refreshed to give them the response that they were hoping for. But the explanation helps. Okay. Because if I don't do that and they grow up in this environment just thinking, oh, dad doesn't really care. He doesn't really care. That's not going to be helpful for them. But it's good for me to know myself, right? Let's talk about the relational dynamic. Okay. We're different people. We are different people. And introvert, extrovert, for those of you who don't use those terms or not familiar with them, an introvert is somebody who is more likely to be more quiet. They think about things a whole lot more before they say things. They enjoy typically time alone, or that's how they recharge, solo activities or small groups. Whereas extroverts, they love engaging with other people. And some extroverts, the more people, the better, right? You could not have a party with three people with an extrovert. It's just, it's going to be like a waste of time. Whereas, someone like me, I'm probably like 60-40 introvert extrovert. Okay. I love time by myself. I love quality time with small groups of people, one-on-one. A lot of people are like, how do you do what you do? I I get energy from meeting with people. I love it. One on one, a real deep conversation. Give that to me any day. Give me a superficial conversation, I will lose interest. Throw me into a room with like 10,000 people and expect me to engage on these superficial, I'm not interested. Okay. After doing something like that, I would be so drained, more likely to react. Okay. Then you have family history. You come from a family with certain practices and or certain traumas. We carry these things with us. So if you walk into an environment and somebody from your family or someone of the same culture, it can influence the way that you feel and the way that you react. If you have issues with someone going back 10 years and they're in the room, you might behave a little bit differently than if they're not in the room. Okay. Now let's talk about spiritual parts. Now, this is a topic that not a lot of people in our society will agree on or even really talk about unless you're in certain circles, because it's the intangible stuff. It's some people call it energy. Some people think about spirit. Some people think about evil and good and all these things that you can't always just put your finger on. But these things, they influence us, right? They're the things that you can't really explain, but sometimes you have a sense about, or you might have an in-depth history. I come from a Christian background, a charismatic background, evangelical, all these terms. But I totally believe in spiritual things. And, it's important to be aware that sometimes you might be reacting to something, feeling something that somebody else feels halfway around the world. Some people have dreams and these dreams come true. Like there's a spiritual dynamic that is important to know about yourself as a person. Why is all of this important? Well, when we know ourselves well, then we can cultivate healthy expectations for ourselves. Okay? Expectations for ourselves, because sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves. We think because we react to something that's bad. And I know I differentiated between reactions and responses. There's a difference. Ideally, we want to respond, but let's not forget you are human. And just because you react to something doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Okay? This is all about having healthy expectations. And healthy expectations are things that we cultivate for ourselves and with others. We're talking about ourselves right now. So it's important to know the difference between a healthy expectation and an unhealthy expectation. So I have some principles, okay? I really want you to pay attention to this because it's going to help you to renew the way that you respond to yourself. Okay? Healthy expectations, they are clear, okay? If you do not have clarity about your own expectations, which most of us don't, okay, then that expectation isn't going to be healthy. One of the ways you know there's some sort of expectation is when there's a should or shouldn't in the statement that we say to ourselves or think to ourselves or say to others, right? Oh, I shouldn't have reacted that way. That means there's an expectation. You have a standard of some sort, but the standard might not be clear, or that standard might not be realistic. Okay, it's important. What is realistic? Realistic is it's doable or it's not doable. Sometimes we have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. You should never get angry. You should never get that angry that you. Now, there's a difference between a desire and an expectation. You could desire to never get so angry that you think about hurting somebody. You could desire that. You can desire whatever you want. But that expectation or that standard of care for other people, that can become unrealistic if you haven't slept for a whole month. Sleep deprivation is a thing. Okay? It is a real thing. So it's important to be realistic. Okay? And it's also important to be fair and appropriate. When I say fair, I don't mean like the same or just between you and me. When I say fair, I mean appropriate for the person, for the context, developmentally. So sometimes my expectations of myself, for example, years ago, I would feel very upset with myself when I didn't perform well in a given task because I have these standards and these hopes and these expectations of myself to always be great. But if I've never tried something before, is that fair? I could desire to do great at something. But if I didn't train, if I didn't invest the time or have, I I should have known better. You ever say that to yourself? I should have known. Sometimes that's just not appropriate. You can't know what you've never been taught. Okay. So cultivating healthy expectations for yourself is important. That's the first place we want to start. Before we start talking about other people and their reactions, we want to look at our own. Okay. So I spent a lot of time here because this is the most important slide here. Get to know yourself because the way that you treat yourself on the inside, it comes out. And we treat other people the same way. And the closer they are to us is the more we treat them like we treat ourselves on the inside. It's so much easier to be nicer to a stranger than it is to somebody who's close to you. At least that's what I've found. All the people I've worked with, I don't think anybody has disagreed. If you disagree, you let me know. But now we're going to talk about what can we do about the reactions of others. Okay. Here's where we're going to talk about. There's going to be some overlap here, some repeating here, but in a different context. But it's important to know your sphere of control. Okay. And I use that word intentionally here because the only person you're really in control of is yourself. And I think when children are young, it's relevant, right? Because they don't have a level of maturity, a level of intelligence. They're young. We are responsible for them and we have responsibility over them. There's an exercise of control. But once you start to move past a certain age and level of maturity, it's not about control anymore. Okay. We're transitioning from control to influence. You do not, let me rephrase this. In most situations, it is unhealthy if we are trying to control people, even if they are reacting or overreacting, we don't want to control them. Okay. So we want to be aware of patterns. Again, just like we have patterns for ourselves, we can have patterns of interactions with other people. If you tend to lose it over and over and over in certain environments or with certain people, step back, Look at the context. Do a sequence of events. What happened first? What happened next? Who was there? Ask those questions. Become aware of patterns. You'll see. I'll admit, couple work is not my favorite kind of work. It is really not. Because more often than not, people are looking for the other person to change. And this happens in family work too. But a lot of the times, the issues that happen in these relationships, they predate the relationship. But most people didn't look at the pattern. Okay? We carry stuff for generations. It's important to look at the patterns. Don't just look at your parents, look at their parents. If you know their parents and their parents, look at that stuff. There are patterns. Okay? Know your role. Know your role in the person's life. Very rarely is your role one of control. However, you can influence and impact someone. And I'm not talking about being manipulative in a negative, controlling way. We are in relationships with people. We have an impact on people. They have an impact on us. Let's just be real. But in different relationships, you can have different roles. There are some elements where, you might be a teacher if it's a mentoring relationship, or even in a husband and wife relationship, a spousal relationship. There are things that my wife doesn't know, and I teach her. There are things I don't know. She's a nurse. There's so many things that I've learned from her, and so many things that I will learn from her. So sometimes we're in a teaching role. However, sometimes we try to exercise that role, and it doesn't work. Doesn't work. You get a reaction. Pay attention. Pay attention. I'm working with this family, and the son, he blows up. And I'm talking to him. I'm like, she's lecturing you. He's like, yeah, she's trying to teach me, but she's not listening to what I have to say. You get to pay attention. What role are you trying to fill? And is it aggravating the situation, or is it making it better? Okay. Sometimes we want to be friends with somebody, especially in a parent-child dynamic. Sometimes it's wonderful when you have that trust and that friendliness and a genuine friendship. But then there are other times when it's important that we're not just friends. There's a distinct difference, right? We want to be aware. Are you an encourager? Sometimes people just want to be encouraged. They don't want you to fix it. They just want to have some encouragement, or they want somebody to listen. You can influence people's reactions and their responses when you're intentional about the role. And I put aggravator here because sometimes we're just miserable, and misery loves company, and we want other people to be miserable. So we make things worse. And they're reacting to us because we typically make things worse. There are some people who they protect themselves from worry and disappointment by just focusing on the negative. Negative, negative, negative. Be careful if you do this. Don't do that. Oh, it's raining today. Oh, woo. Negativity can aggravate people. Pay attention to the role that you play. Okay? Pay attention. Now, you're human. It's okay. You're not going to get it right. But if you're going to get good at something, get good at cultivating your timing. Just because somebody's upset with something doesn't mean that right then and there is the best time to address it. Timing is critical. Okay? Even when you want to do the right thing, even if you're wrong and you apologize, sometimes the timing can make or break that experience. Okay? Let's talk about boundaries. Now, I'm all about having compassion for people's reactions and understanding, but this is where it gets really tricky and hard. But being clear about boundaries is important. And the earlier you do that in a relationship, the better. If you know somebody's reactive, you can say, you know what, I see that this is hard for you. However, I have this boundary where I don't like people swearing at me. That's just a boundary for me. Other people might like it, they might be comfortable. I don't like it. So if that's what you want to do or need to do that, then I'm going to excuse myself or ask that you not do that around me. You want to be clear about the boundaries. If people are crossing the line physically with you, sexually with you, emotionally with you, all those kinds of things, we want to get good at setting boundaries because that's within our sphere of control. And I know it can be complicated because when people have power, depending on the role or the environment and even the culture, it can be a little bit more complicated. But it's important to be aware that you do have autonomy. You do have some locus of control. It's important to be aware of that. And then developing healthy expectations. We talked about it for ourselves, but it's important to have healthy expectations of others. If our expectations of others are not fair, they're not appropriate, they're not going to be healthy. If they're not clear, if you haven't told someone how you feel about being when they're late and that how that upsets you and you interpret it as disrespectful, how are they supposed to know? They're different people. Okay. And one of the things that really makes or breaks relationships is agreement. Healthy expectations between two people, if there's no agreement, is not going to be very healthy. It's not going to be very healthy. So we want to be aware of that. Okay. I imagine that some of you have thoughts coming up, situations coming up. If you have questions, get them ready because I'm gonna have some time for that. You can put them anonymously if you just send them to me, and I won't mention your name. You can even come up with a scenario about, somebody's cousin way down the way. But these things are the things that most of us don't think about until we're in the middle of the situation. And then it's harder to address because we're in the middle of it. Okay. So let's talk about what we can do, especially as we are wanting to work on ourselves. Okay. Nobody's perfect. That means we all have room to grow. What can you do if you find yourself to be reactive and you've looked at the patterns and you've looked at the sequence of events and you've seen that, I have these unfair expectations of myself and you want to do something about it? Believe it or not, you can train your brain. You train your brain. I think this is the biggest advantage we have as human beings. We can be intentional. And when I work, excuse me, with and on myself, even in a spiritual context, what I call the ATI process helps me every time. And I use it as I work with people because growing yourself involves training the way that you think and the way that you feel, the way that you speak, and the way that you interact with other people. It involves these three things, increasing these things, three things. Number one, you want to increase your awareness. Yes, awareness of patterns, but also an awareness of what you're feeling. Okay. In my journaling course that I share with people, I encourage people to label their emotions, increase your emotional repertoire, the language. When you identify how you feel,
Yeah.
you ground yourself. Okay. It's like I was at I was at someone's home the other day and a fire broke out on the stove. Um,
Yeah.
okay, someone's not muted. Um, yeah. So
Oh, sorry.
that's okay. Um, so yeah, the fire broke out on the stove, and because they had a handle on the pan, they moved it and because they didn't have whatever they needed to kind of put the fire out. So they were able to move it. They were able to they had a handle on it. And sometimes we're reactive because we don't have a handle on our own emotions. There's something grounding about being able to label your emotion and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And then as you do that, you learn to increase your tolerance for that emotion. A lot of the times people think emotions that are intense are negative. Just because an emotion is intense doesn't mean it is negative. I don't think there are negative emotions. I think emotions can be unpleasant or pleasant. They might not feel good, but that doesn't mean that they're not good or healthy or appropriate for the context. Some people don't like to deal with sadness or disappointment or grief and loss because it's not fun. But if you've lost something or someone, then it makes sense to feel that. And if we shut that down because we're unfamiliar with it, we're uncomfortable with it, what we're doing is we're telling our brain, okay, this is not safe. I can't handle this. And some of us say this to ourselves. We say to other people, I can't handle this. I can't deal with this. I can't. What you're doing is you're abdicating control. You're giving up control over yourself, over your own emotions. That's like somebody saying, I want to lose weight, but I'm not going to the gym. I want to get in better shape, but I'm not going to work out. That doesn't work out very well. You want to be able to tolerate the emotions because you are going to feel sad again. If you're in a relationship with human beings, other imperfect human beings, you're going to be hurt again. It doesn't have to be by the same person or the same hurt, but hurt is a part of human relationships and interactions. The absence of conflict is not the definition of a healthy relationship. Our response to the conflict, that is what makes us healthy or unhealthy. There are going to be disagreements. There are going to be misunderstandings. There are going to be unrealistic, unhealthy, unfair expectations. This is a part of being human. But if we just react and then we shut down, be like, can't deal with it, can't tolerate it, that's where you're going to stay. You can move from one relationship to the next. You can move from relating to your husband, to your child, to your sister, to your teacher, to your employer. If you are unable to handle the emotions in your body, I've been doing a lot of body work with people. What does that feel like? And when people start to describe what that feels like, there's this energy, there's this pulsating thing, this reverberating thing. And the more they describe it, and I encourage them to breathe as they feel it, and they calm themselves. There's this concept of neuroplasticity where you actually train your brain to respond differently to things. Okay. Whether we're talking about learning to deal with physical pain or learning to handle your emotions better or handle certain dynamics in relationships or environments, it's important to train your brain. So the part that kind of reacts and says, oh my God, we're not safe, can be like, oh, it's uncomfortable, but I'm okay. I'm safe. I can deal with this. Because only when you can tolerate the unpleasant emotions can you be intentional in that moment. And this is the biggest word that a definition of being responsive as opposed to reactive is there's a level of intentionality to it. You can think about it. You can be intentional in the moment. So you want to say, okay, I don't want to react. Well, what other options do I have? Because a lot of this is in retrospect. This is why I encourage journaling. Retrospectively, I can look, what would I have preferred to have done? What would I feel good about? This is how you train your brain. Because a lot of the times, the things that we want to do in certain environments, we might not have seen it done in our cultural context, in our relationships. So a lot of times we didn't have good models. Good intentions are not good enough. Some people are like, I'm not going to beat my kids. Or some people, I'm not going to do this. This was done to me. This was done to me, and I'm not going to do it. Woo. We perform what we rehearse. What you've seen and what you watch over in your head, that's typically what you end up doing. So as you journal and you reflect and you think, what would I want to do differently? You can use your creativity, your imagination to say, okay, what would I feel good about? You know what? I yelled at my child. What would I rather do instead? I'd rather breathe. I'd rather calm myself and have a conversation. And as you do that, Your body can't tell the difference between what you imagine and what's real. What imagine and what you remember, they can't tell the difference. So when you imagine it a certain way, you're training your body, be like, oh, I could do that. I could do that. And the more you do it, the more you rehearse it, is the better chance you'll have at performing it. And that's what being intentional is all about. You can train your brain. This is not something you can do for somebody else. This is what you do for yourself. But if you do this with the people that you love, they will be impacted. They will be influenced, maybe even inspired. Okay? So if you remember anything I said today, remember this. We're not talking about control. We're talking about influence when it comes to other people. We want to be a positive influence. It goes a whole lot further than control, because once that person is out of earshot or within reach, they're going to revert to what they always did. But if you influence someone, you can have the kind of impact that will last a lifetime and from one generation to the next. Okay. So we've got a few minutes left. And, you know, if you have questions, by all means, you can throw them in the chat or raise your hand, and then I will ask you to unmute. But one of the things that people often wonder, like, I've been like this for years. Can you help me change this? It's been a long time. And the answer is yes. There are a few components that contribute to how someone changes or whether someone changes. One of them is capacity. Some people, very few people, might have limited capacity for change. But if you want change, you can grow even limited capacity. You can grow capacity for change, but most people just don't know how to change. So if you want change, we will look at capacity, but we'll also look at desire, and then we will get clarity, and we'll move along that spectrum into healthy expectations of yourself and healthy expectations of other people. All right? Any questions?
Yes, I do. I do. Sorry for the interruption. I was really paying attention. I just had to share a flyer. So, um, I have this question, and this is from personal experiences. Okay, how do you communicate the third time to someone older than you? You know, we have this knowledge, this experience of older ones finding it so difficult to take instructions from younger ones. And then probably in place of work, even in family, you're telling the person that is older than you that has to do this particular thing, or you're trying to communicate something to them. And to them, it's like you're telling them that mindset of that she's telling me what to do. And you've said this thing before, and you don't know, how do you not explain to this person that you've said this thing before, but then the second or third time you just find yourself raising your voice at this older person. And guess who gets to be castigated? You, right? So it's something that I've had to experience over and over and over and over. And really I'm tired of it, to be honest with you. And also that's one question. Like, what do you do? Do you just walk away? Do you let it slide? How do you handle that situation? That's number one. Then number two, how do you best find yourself listening to your children? Because there's something you said, and I had that experience recently with one of my kids, and he was like, "Mommy, you're not listening." He didn't want my advice. He didn't want me to hear. He wasn't coming for me to just to talk. He just wanted to share what he was feeling at that time. Now, as a mother, how do you now not say anything, even though you know this child needs counsel? Like, how do you handle that situation? Thank you, and thank you for the teaching. It's always inspiring. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Two very good questions. So the first one is, how do you address someone who is older? Because sometimes you find yourself getting upset. It's not the first time, the second time you've tried to address something. So I think remember what I said about timing? That's going to be very, very big because sometimes we expect people to hear us the first time around. Or sometimes we might approach them in the presence of other people. It's not a good look, right? That's not a good idea. So you want to be aware of the relationship that you have with the person, and you get to think about what's the best approach for that person. So depending on what it is, I know there's a lot of possibilities, but typically this is how I do it with older people, but also younger people. Private conversations, number one. But number two, to come from a place of genuine curiosity, right? I want to understand how and why the person does what they do. Where does this come from? Yes, I do encourage people to think about their impact beyond their intention. I want them to think about impact. But when it comes to influencing other people, we do want to start to think about their intention. What are they meaning? Where does this come from? And you can actually ask them. I noticed that you say this a certain way. Where does that come from? Have you always said things like that? Right? We want to get the backstory. We want to know them. We want to know where it's coming from because sometimes that can change our heart and align ourselves with them. That doesn't mean our expectation is going to be dismissed, but depending on what it is, you might stand a better chance of helping this person to think about change or move towards change if you are an ally, right? If they experience you as an ally. And I'll tie this into the second question that you asked. How do you listen well to your children when you really just want to jump in and give them some advice because they need some advice, they could use some help? Number one, the curiosity thing is important. Genuine curiosity. You're not asking questions to teach them a lesson. You're asking questions to understand their perspective. What is it that they want from you? Why is it so important that they feel heard in that moment? There's probably a lot of value to that for them and for you. So it's not all or nothing. Just because you're listening doesn't mean that there's going to be no room to give them any advice. But depending on the age and stage, as well as the level of concern about this issue. For example, if it's a test, okay, they're in grade 9 and you want them to pass the test, that might just be a lesson that they learn the hard way, right? You can acknowledge, I have some advice for you, but it doesn't seem like you want to hear it right now. You could be explicit about that and let it sit. Sometimes they got to feel the burn to learn, right? So you let them face the consequence. Now, if it is something that is of significance and there's some sort of danger, it's going to be important to be clear about that. To say, I've heard you out, or I'm having a difficult time hearing you out because I'm concerned about this. It is so important and valuable to be explicit about our concerns with our kids. Now, if our anxiety is activated and we're worried, because there's a difference between being worried and being concerned. Okay. Worry is when you just have these thoughts that spin and spin and spin about situations that are likely not to happen. That's worry. Concern is there's a strong chance that this could happen. Children don't see what we see a lot of the time. Teens, young adults, even adults don't always see things that you might be concerned about. So it's important to be clear and explicit about the concern. I'm concerned that this might happen and this might happen. Are you concerned about that? Because now this is the locus of control. We're not trying to control, we're trying to influence, we're trying to empower. When we ask a question as opposed to making a command, we're changing the dynamic because they still have choice. If they don't have choice, the chances they're going to rebel. Even if they agree with you, they're just going to do the opposite because we like to have choice. We've been given autonomy. We want to use it. So we want to switch from commands to questions to harness motivation. So if they share the concern, there you have an ally. So if you're concerned about this, what can you do in that situation? You don't have to tell them what to do. You can ask. And if they don't share the concern, here's a $1 million question. Well, just humor me. How would you know if it were becoming a problem, if it were becoming concerned? What would be the signs? How would you know? Okay. I've used this strategy over and over and over, especially with a lot of teens who are in risky situations where they have this invincible mentality, like, oh, that could never happen to me. Okay, might not. But how would you know if somebody who's about to take advantage of you or trying to take advantage of you, what are some signs? How could you tell? Because it does happen. How could you tell? And it gets them to start thinking, oh, I might notice this. Well, if you did notice that, how would you deal with it? And then they start to think for themselves, and then they start to access the capacity. And you, as a parent or caregiver, your level of concern starts to come down because you're like, okay, they're not oblivious to this. They actually are prepared to handle this. So that's how I would do it. It's not all or nothing. You definitely want to listen, but in situations where there's concrete concerns, we do want to communicate with them what our concerns are in a way that they can hear them. So the packaging is critical. All right. So that's how we renew our minds. That's how we renew our relationships. We train the brain. We increase our awareness, our tolerance, and our intentionality. And I thank you all for your time. I know we've gone over time today, but you got 4 bonus moments. Okay, 4 bonus minutes. It's good seeing you all. Good being with you. And I'll hand over to our moderator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwood, for today's session. It is quite revealing and eye-opener. Indeed, my mind is renewed. And to everyone for being here today, your presence, your openness, and your willingness to engage in today's session truly made a difference. We hope to see you in our next session. Please keep your eyes open on our website, www.ynotservices.org. We love you. And all right, everyone, before we officially close out for today's session, we have a little something special for everyone that participated today, a raffle draw. Just our way of saying thank you for being here today and participating. So let's spin the wheel. And the lucky winner will go home with a ticket to Reptilia. Let's go. Yeah. And the lucky winner is Bob. So you can come to the office for your ticket. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Mhm.